Okay, so real quick, if I were to ask you to describe your dream Strat to me, what would you say? What would the neck radius be? What kind of strings would you have on there? And obviously, what kind of pickups would you put on that bad boy? If I were to be completely honest with you, when I first started playing guitar and really getting into gear back in college, if you had asked me that question, I wouldn't have had a lot of really specific answers. I knew hardly anything about individual specs and what made them important to guitars. I didn't know about neck radiuses, I didn't know about neck materials, I didn't know what locking tuners were, but the one thing I would have told you I absolutely needed in my ideal Strat: Texas Special pickups. Now, for those of you like me who may not have known, Texas Specials are a specific style of pickup that uses enamel-coated wiring that was originally introduced by Fender in the early 1990s that are known for delivering on that like classic Texas blues sound. But none of that really meant anything to me or even mattered at all. What mattered to me was the fact that these were the style of pickups that Stevie Ray Vaughan had in his guitar. And as you could probably guess, once I heard that information, well, I was hooked. You see, I studied a lot of different guitar players around this time, guys like Hendrix and Clapton, and even more than just their playing, a lot of what really connected me to the instrument and to those individual players was the actual stories behind them and the stories behind their gear. And very few captivated me more than the stories I would hear about a Mr. Stevie Ray Vaughan. From hearing that he was sleeping on pool tables to hearing rumors that he was playing so hard that he had to super glue his calluses back together, Stevie started to become sort of this mythical figure in my mind, and I wanted to play like him. I wanted to make the same insane guitar faces that he made, and obviously I wanted to know what was going on behind his gear. Now, amp-wise, I pretty quickly realized that this man had been all over the place. I mean, he had used Fenders, Dumbles, Marshalls, you name it. But when it came to guitars specifically, there was always one that seemed to stick out over all the rest: his first wife, his number one. But who or what even is First Wife? Well, thank you for asking. It's the name given to Stevie's 1963 Strat. It was actually gifted to him by a guitar store owner in 1973, and he used it all over the world on different tours and different live shows, and even on every single studio album by Double Trouble. You see, this wasn't just any Strat. It had this vibe and this energy that just sort of leapt off the screen, and you could feel it from the beaten up aesthetic all the way to the fact that the name was embroidered on the pickguard, SRV. And for a long time, like a lot of different guitar players, I genuinely wondered what would that feel like in real time and what in person made that guitar so special. And that's where, well, this sort of comes into play. And what is this? This is a case. What matters is actually what's in the case. So 60% of the time, this is 100% of my favorite part. You see, this is a Stevie Ray Vaughan signature, and I've had it for about 6 months now. It was originally introduced in 1992 and was meant to be an incredibly accurate recreation of that original #1 guitar. But sadly, Stevie was never there to see it released. You see, what I learned was that the initial design of the guitar actually started in the late 80s before Stevie's unexpected passing in 1990. But then in 91, Jimmy, his brother, a blues legend in his own right, resumed talks with Fender, and the guitar eventually released in 92 at NAMM in LA. And that's where we happened to get this guitar. Well, a little bit more modern. And much like Stevie himself, this guitar is very, very unique. It's got an alder body and a maple neck, both specs that were directly inspired and taken from that original #1 guitar. But the real interesting part didn't actually hit me until I started to take a look at this neck. So this neck definitely happens to be very different than most Strats I've played before, and it's not necessarily just because it's chunky. One of the things that I've noticed more recently, especially with Fender doing a lot of their more vintage inspired stuff, is seeing that 7¼ inch neck radius. And if you had told me a guitar that was inspired by something from the 60s was coming out, I would think that it would have that exact same radius or something similar. But Stevie Ray actually opted to replace that original neck and go with a 12-inch radius, making it one of the flatter necks that I've seen on a Strat. Even when comparing it to something like my American Professional, which has a pretty flat neck for a Strat at 11 inches, this is 12. And even going back to the question of the chunky neck, when I really start to put my hands around this thing, it makes me wonder just how big Stevie Ray's hands actually were to be playing a neck this chunky with 13s on it, because the rumor has it that even though he wasn't a very tall man, he was standing at like 5'5", he had gigantic hands, which is what made this more comfortable for him. And especially coming from someone who I think I have some pretty big hands, after having played my Silver Sky or something with like a much thinner neck, this definitely takes some getting used to. But what doesn't take some getting used to that I found was these actual pickups. are the Texas Specials, and this is the only guitar I've ever had, or I think even played, that has them in there. And these pickups come with a lot of different expectations, just with it being the blues sound. I think they also have them in the Jimmy Vaughan Tex-Mex guitar. But one of the things that I think is really cool is just how versatile they are, especially for different styles of blues. Now, if I'm being completely honest, this is not the most versatile guitar I've ever played, and I don't think that's what it was meant to be. This was meant to do the Stevie Ray Vaughan thing, but even within the Stevie Ray Vaughan thing, there are so many different types of tones that he would use. Like the same guitar that has to do this also has to get some of the more beautiful clean tones that I've ever heard on something like Lenny or Riviera Paradise. But I think it's just because of the expectations that I have placed on Texas Specials as being this really biting thing, which it does have. But I forget a lot of the times just how cool the clean tones actually are on this guitar. Even right now, when I'm going out of something like a one-channel amp, I have to consistently remind myself, okay, it's time to turn off the pedal, just go out of the rhythm section, and kind of really see what this thing can do. So once I had figured out more about the sound of these pickups, I started to actually lean into the construction of this guitar as a whole and finding out more about that. And that's where I discovered something really interesting. Because remember beforehand when I said that this guitar was initially supposed to be an exceedingly accurate recreation of that original First Wife guitar from Stevie? I found out that there actually might be something that's even one step closer than this. You see, as of 2004, it wasn't just the artist Strat, but Fender actually created the custom shop Stevie Ray Vaughan artist guitar. Now, there are three main differences that I found between this and the custom shop version that released in 2004. The first of which, if we're referring back to the pickups, is those pickups are hand wired. The second of which I think could be a big thing for a lot of people, is that this has a polyurethane finish, which is a lot more modern, and the nitrocellulose lacquer is what's on the custom shop, which in doing further research, which makes sense for a 60s guitar, is what was on that first original First Wife guitar. Now, the other thing, which I think might be the biggest deal for some people and some people might not care, the current model of the Signature, the neck is Paw Ferro, whereas the custom shop and the original First Wife, those both have rosewood. So at the end of the day, why does any of this matter? What did we even learn? Well, I'll tell you. Specifically when it comes to this guitar, what I've realized is it's not the easiest to play. It's not the most versatile, but it is, without question, the most Stevie Ray Vaughan thing that they could have ever come up with, and that is more than enough. And I'm sure even more so once you start getting into like the actual custom shop Stevie Ray Vaughan guitar. I love that this is just like a blues machine. I think a lot of times I get stuck in this heavy debate, especially when it comes to Strats and Tellys. What's the most versatile? What can I bring to the most gigs? And then I discover a guitar like this that does exactly what it's meant to do. All that to say, I'm just really glad that this guitar was made, and I think it's a really cool thing that Jimmy was able to do to honor his brother. I don't think there's that many guitars out there with this much sentimental value, even amongst some of the Signature and the artist models that are out there nowadays, and it's a really cool thing to play. And just seeing how unique the build quality is with the Texas Specials, with the flat neck, Stevie and Jimmy, they had something cool on their hands. But I don't think it matters what I think. What matters is what you think. Are you a fan of the Stevie Ray Vaughan Signature Strat? Do you think other Strats are better? What's your favorite Signature out there? Please let me know in the comments. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. I've been wanting to take the time to talk about this guitar again for a while, just after I had a little bit more time to play it and get to know it, and also just the fun of doing the research on Jimmy and Stevie and just the history behind how this guitar even got built. If you want to know anything more about the Stevie Ray Vaughan Signature, the links are in the description. Make sure to check it out. It's one of the best ways to support the channel if that's something you want to do. Or if you're just curious about any of the other gear that I use in this video or any of the other videos, make sure to check out those links. Also, thank you so much to all my patrons. There's some extra stuff, some behind the scenes stuff on there. Like and subscribe if you had a good time. And most importantly, most important of all, have a fantastic day.